Why is the U.S. eyeing Caribbean nations for mass deportations? What's behind this sudden shift in immigration focus? Could this affect families and workers who have built their lives in America? Let's dive into the real story behind this major policy development. The U.S. government is preparing for a sweeping deportation campaign that could have major consequences for immigrants from the Caribbean region. Internal planning and leaked reports show that at least 7 countries are now under active review for enforcement operations: Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Bahamas. This shift in enforcement strategy is not just another headline. It marks a realignment in how the U.S. handles immigration removals, with a specific focus on Caribbean nationals. Targeting the Caribbean, the backstory. The new deportation strategy is part of a larger federal push to ramp up enforcement against individuals with expired visas, denied asylum claims, or prior deportation orders. While border crossers from Central America have long been the primary focus, this change in direction now places the spotlight squarely on immigrants from the Caribbean, even those who have lived in the U.S. for years, sometimes decades. Unlike many undocumented migrants who cross the southern border, a large number of Caribbean immigrants originally entered the U.S. through legal means. Many arrived on tourist, student, or work visas and overstayed. Others were granted temporary protected status (TPS) due to crises in their home countries, protections that could now be rolled back depending on future administrations. And that's not speculation. Former President Donald Trump has already laid out plans to increase mass deportations if re-elected, and reports suggest that logistical groundwork for such removals is already in progress. What's driving this shift? A few major factors explain why Caribbean immigrants are now being targeted. Overburdened IC detention centers, especially in states like Florida and New York, which have significant Caribbean populations. Facilities are reaching capacity. The federal government is under pressure to process and deport detainees faster. Election year strategy. With immigration shaping up to be a dominant issue in the 2024 election, hardline enforcement policies are being pushed as political messaging. Targeting overstays and TPS recipients can be framed as rule of law crackdowns to energize certain voting blocs. Increased visa tracking capabilities. Unlike unauthorized border crossers, visa overstayers often leave a clearer digital footprint. New technology and data sharing agreements make it easier for ICE to identify, track, and locate these individuals. National security rhetoric. Officials are tying immigration enforcement more closely to crime and national safety concerns, which builds public support for tough immigration measures, even against long-standing residents. Countries at the center of attention. Let's take a closer look at the individual countries being watched. Haiti. Haiti continues to face severe political unrest and humanitarian challenges. TPS has protected many Haitians from deportation, but with conditions under review, those protections may soon be narrowed or rescinded. Reports in 2024 already confirm a rise in deportation flights to Port-au-Prince. 2. Dominican Republic. Dominicans represent one of the largest Caribbean diasporas in the U.S. The focus on this group has intensified, especially in cities like New York and Boston. ICE is reportedly prioritizing removal of those with criminal records or immigration violations, regardless of how long they've been in the country. 3. Jamaica. Many Jamaicans face scrutiny over visa overstays. Unlike some other groups, they typically enter the U.S. legally, making them more easily traceable. Immigration enforcement has increasingly viewed these profiles as low-hanging fruit. For the Bahamas, despite strong bilateral relations, Bahamian nationals are not exempt from this wave. After Hurricane Dorian, the U.S. allowed temporary stays for many Bahamians. However, as those emergency protections expire, deportation is now being actively considered for those who remain. 5. St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago. These smaller nations are rarely in the immigration spotlight, but that's changing. The U.S. has held behind-the-scenes talks with these governments to coordinate repatriation efforts, including logistics for chartered removal flights. These partnerships are expected to accelerate deportations in the coming months. What this means for Caribbean families in the U.S. The most unsettling part of this shift is that it doesn't just target recent arrivals. Many of the people at risk have families, homes, and stable employment. They pay taxes, own businesses, and contribute to local economies. Their children are enrolled in U.S. schools. Mass deportation plans could tear these families apart. The psychological toll is already being felt. With ICE activity on the rise, many are avoiding public spaces, skipping medical appointments, or even pulling their children from school out of fear. This self-isolation weakens community safety and trust. Deportation flights increasing. Over the last few months, deportation flights to several Caribbean countries have quietly ramped up. These operations are rarely publicized, but advocacy groups have tracked an uptick in flights to Haiti, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. If Trump returns to power, these removals could become a daily routine, potentially sending hundreds back per week, far exceeding current levels under the Biden administration. Legal protections are under threat. Many advocates are sounding the alarm over possible legal rollbacks. If DACA, TPS, and other humanitarian protections are eliminated or restricted, tens of thousands of Caribbean immigrants could suddenly be vulnerable to removal, even if they were previously shielded. Reinstating extreme vetting measures and eliminating avenues for asylum seekers, both of which are goals publicly stated by Trump, would also disproportionately affect Caribbean nationals. What Caribbean immigrants should know. Here are key steps individuals and families should consider. Seek legal counsel if you're on a temporary status or have an immigration case pending. Avoid risky travel through airports or state lines if your immigration status is uncertain. Know your rights if approached by ICE. Many don't realize they are not required to open the door or answer questions without a warrant. Keep legal documentation updated and accessible in case of emergencies. Could this affect the U.S. labor market? Absolutely. Caribbean immigrants make up a significant portion of the labor force in key areas like home health care, public transportation, food services, and hospitality. If mass removals go forward, many of these sectors could suffer sudden labor shortages. Employers already report difficulty in filling roles, and the removal of an experienced workforce would only deepen the gap. Economically, the ripple effect could be felt across entire metropolitan areas. Final thought. This isn't just a policy memo. It's a real shift with lasting consequences. For many Caribbean families in the U.S., it's a looming crisis that threatens stability, livelihoods, and decades of community building. What happens next depends largely on the upcoming election and the leadership that follows. But regardless of politics, Caribbean immigrants in America must stay informed, stay cautious, and be prepared for what could come next.